The dust kicked up around Katherine Nelson's carriage as it rolled into Oroville, Wyoming Territory, in the summer of 1876, drawing stares from every weathered face on Main Street. She clutched the letter from her late uncle in one gloved hand, while the other nervously adjusted her Eastern-tailored traveling dress out of place in this frontier town, where the promise of silver had drawn fortune-seekers and desperate men in equal measure. Katherine had inherited the Silver Spur Saloon, a fact that sat as uncomfortably on her shoulders as the weight of every pair of eyes following her arrival. Her parents had begged her to sell it from afar, but at 23, with dreams larger than Boston could contain, she'd chosen to see her inheritance for herself before deciding its fate. "Another city girl come to try her luck," muttered a voice as she stepped down from the carriage, her buttoned boots meeting the dusty Wyoming soil for the first time. "Give her 2 weeks before she runs back east," replied another. Katherine straightened her spine, ignoring the whispers that followed her like shadows as she made her way toward the modest hotel. She refused to show how their words stung, how they made her question the impulsive decision that had brought her 2,000 miles from home. "Need help with those bags, miss?" A deep voice cut through the murmurs. Katherine turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His hat was pulled low, but she could see dark blonde hair beneath it. He wore a pistol at his hip with the casual ease of someone who knew how to use it but hoped not to. "I can manage," she replied, though her arms already ached from carrying her single valise. He tipped his hat respectfully. "Quinn O'Connor, at your service regardless." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Welcome to Oroville. I'd wager you're the new owner of the Silver Spur." Katherine's lips parted in surprise. "News travels fast in small towns, I see." "Like wildfire in August," he confirmed with a nod. Then, noticing the continued stares from the townspeople going about their business, he added in a voice meant to carry, "Let them stare. You're the finest thing this town has seen in years." Katherine felt a blush creep up her neck, but she lifted her chin. "Mr. O'Connor, I'm not here to be admired. I'm here on business." "Of course, miss." "Nelson, Katherine Nelson, Miss Nelson." He nodded again, respect in his eyes. "The staring isn't just because you're beautiful, though you are. It's because this town hasn't had much good fortune lately. The silver's running thin, and we've had 3 businesses close in the last year. Your uncle's saloon is one of the few profitable establishments left." Katherine absorbed this information, reconsidering her plans. "I see. I should warn you, Miss Nelson, your uncle's partner might not be too pleased to see you." "Partner?" The letter from the attorney mentioned nothing about a partner. Quinn O'Connor's expression darkened slightly. "Vince Harlow claims your uncle promised him half the business." "No paper to prove it, though." "I'll handle Mr. Harlow," Katherine said with more confidence than she felt. "I don't doubt it." Quinn smiled again, and Katherine found it difficult not to return the expression. "The hotel's just there. I'd be happy to escort you to the saloon afterward if you'd like." "That would be most helpful, Mr. O'Connor." She paused. "May I ask what brings you to my aid? You don't seem like the usual saloon patron." He laughed, a warm sound that seemed to push back the watchful silence of the town. "I'm the sheriff, Miss Nelson. Helping newcomers is part of my job." "Sheriff?" Katherine reassessed him, noting now the silver star pinned to his vest. "Forgive me, I didn't realize." "No forgiveness necessary. I don't always look the part." He reached for her bag. "Now, will you allow me to carry this, or shall we continue our battle of wills in the middle of the street?" With a small smile, Katherine relinquished her valise. "I suppose I can permit it, Sheriff O'Connor, for the sake of civic harmony." As they walked toward the hotel, Katherine became acutely aware of the whispers following them, speculation about the Eastern woman and her business with the sheriff. But with Quinn walking beside her, the stairs somehow seemed less threatening, and she found herself standing taller as they crossed the dusty main street together. The Silver Spur Saloon was nothing like the refined establishments Katherine had known in Boston. The building stood 2 stories tall with a false front and a wide porch, its paint faded by the relentless Wyoming sun. The windows were cloudy with dust, and the swinging doors had seen better days. But there was something solid about it, something enduring that spoke of possibility. "Your uncle built this place from nothing," Quinn explained as they stood across the street, surveying the property. "Came here in '62 during the first silver strike and never left, even when most others did. He and my father had a falling out before I was born," Katherine replied. "I never met him. Daniel Nelson was a good man, fair in his dealings, helped people when times got tough." Quinn's voice carried a note of respect. He wasn't perfect, ran a saloon after all, but people trusted him. Katherine felt an unexpected pang of loss for the uncle she'd never known. "Why would he leave the saloon to me? He had no reason to think I'd want it," Quinn shrugged. "Some men get sentimental near the end. Maybe he wanted to mend fences with your family the only way he could." As they approached the saloon, Katherine noticed a man standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching their progress with obvious displeasure. He was middle-aged with a thick mustache and expensive clothes that seemed at odds with the frontier setting. "That's Harlow," Quinn said quietly. "Be careful with him. He's got friends on the town council." "Noted," Katherine replied, her mind already calculating how to handle the situation. "Miss Nelson," Harlow called out before they'd even reached the steps. "I've been expecting you, though I must say you're not what I anticipated." "Mr. Harlow," Katherine nodded coolly, "I understand you believe you have some claim to my property." The man's eyes narrowed at her directness. "Your uncle and I had an arrangement. Ask anyone in town." "I intend to," Katherine replied evenly. "But for now, I'd like to see the business I've inherited." "Our business," Harlow corrected, his voice hardening. "Daniel promised me half for the investments I've made. I've got witnesses." Quinn stepped forward. "Maybe we could continue this discussion inside, away from the street." Harlow's gaze flicked to the sheriff, and something unspoken passed between the men. "Fine. Come in, Miss Nelson. I'll show you what your uncle built and what I've helped maintain." The interior of the saloon was dim after the bright Wyoming sunlight, but as Katherine's eyes adjusted, she saw a large room with a long bar along one wall, several tables for cards, and a small stage where a piano sat silent. Everything was clean but worn, speaking of years of use and care. "We open at noon," Harlow explained, his tone suggesting he was humoring her. "Usually full by sundown. The miners come in after their shift and the ranch hands when they can get to town." Katherine nodded, taking mental notes. "And the rooms upstairs, 6 rooms for rent." "Your uncle lived in the back room behind the bar." Harlow gestured toward a door. "Everything's been kept as it was, waiting for you to decide what to do with his personal effects." The mention of her uncle's personal space made the inheritance suddenly more real. This wasn't just a business transaction, it was a life she knew nothing about. "I'd like to see the books," she said firmly. Harlow's expression tightened. "I keep them in the office. This way." As they followed him to a small room off the main floor, Quinn leaned close to whisper, "I'll wait out here. Call if you need me." Katherine nodded gratefully, then stepped into the cramped office where Harlow was already pulling ledgers from a safe behind the desk. "Your uncle was old-fashioned about record-keeping," Harlow explained, placing several leather-bound books on the desk. "Everything's here: income, expenses, payroll." Katherine sat and opened the top ledger, immediately recognizing the methodical hand of someone who valued precision. The columns were neat, the figures aligned perfectly. She'd expected something more haphazard from a frontier saloon owner. "I studied accounting before coming west," Harlow said, noting her surprise. "I convinced your uncle to let me modernize the bookkeeping." Katherine didn't respond, instead scanning the pages with practiced ease. Her father had insisted she understand business matters, unusual for a young woman of her station but invaluable now. Within minutes, she spotted discrepancies that raised questions. "These liquor purchases seem high for the reported sales," she observed. Harlow stiffened slightly. "Supply costs have increased. Transportation to Wyoming isn't cheap. And these payments to miscellaneous labor, nearly $200 last month alone with no names recorded. Additional security. The town's gotten rougher since the mine started laying men off." Katherine made a noncommittal sound and continued her examination. After 20 minutes of silence broken only by the turning of pages, she closed the ledger and looked up at Harlow, who had remained standing throughout her review. "Mr. Harlow, I understand you believe you had an arrangement with my uncle. I'll need to verify that claim, of course. In the meantime, I intend to take full possession of my inheritance and conduct a complete inventory of the business." Harlow's face flushed with anger. "You can't just walk in here and—" "I can, and I am," Katherine interrupted, rising from the chair. "The deed is in my name. Unless you can produce documentation of this alleged partnership, I expect your full cooperation during the transition." "You have no idea how things work out here, Miss Nelson," Harlow said, his voice low. "This isn't Boston. A woman alone can't run a saloon in a mining town." "Perhaps not," Katherine agreed. "But I can certainly hire people who can while I make the business decisions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to see my uncle's quarters." Harlow blocked her path to the door. "Think carefully about what you're doing. I could be a valuable ally or a formidable obstacle." Katherine met his gaze steadily. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Harlow?" "Just offering friendly advice," he replied with a tight smile. "Wyoming Territory can be dangerous for those who don't understand its ways." The door opened before Katherine could respond, and Quinn stepped in. "Everything all right in here?" "Fine, Sheriff," Harlow said smoothly, stepping aside. "Miss Nelson and I were just discussing business prospects." "I'd like to see my uncle's quarters now," Katherine said, moving toward the door. Quinn nodded. "I'll accompany you." As they left Harlow in the office, Katherine felt his eyes boring into her back. She knew she'd made an enemy, but she couldn't afford to show weakness. Not when she suspected Harlow might have been stealing from her uncle for years. "What did you find?" Quinn asked quietly as they crossed the main room. "Enough to concern me," she replied, "but I need more evidence before making accusations." They reached the door behind the bar and Quinn produced a key. "The mayor gave me this after your uncle passed, said to give it to you when you arrived." "Thank you." Katherine took the key, her fingers brushing against his momentarily. She ignored the small flutter in her chest at the contact and turned the key in the lock. The room beyond was modest but comfortable, a bed with a hand-stitched quilt, a washstand, a small desk near the window, and shelves lined with books. What surprised Katherine most was the cleanliness. Everything was dusted and in its place, as if Daniel Nelson had stepped out momentarily rather than passed away months ago. "Mrs. Abernathy from the boarding house has been coming in to clean once a week," Quinn explained, seeing her surprise. "She and your uncle were friends for many years." Katherine moved to the desk, where a framed photograph caught her eye, a young man and woman on their wedding day. She recognized her father, looking much younger than she'd ever seen him, standing beside a woman who must be her mother. "He kept a picture of my parents," she said softly, picking up the frame. Quinn stepped closer. Family was important to him, even when they were estranged. Katherine set the photograph down and opened the desk drawer, finding neat stacks of correspondence and personal papers. "I have much to go through. You'll need a place to stay," Quinn noted. "The hotel's comfortable enough, but I should stay here," Katherine finished. "To establish my presence and protect my interests." Quinn nodded. "Harlow has allies in town, some genuine, others bought. Your uncle had friends too, though good people who'll stand by you if you ask." "Like yourself?" Katherine asked, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm sworn to uphold the law, Miss Nelson. That includes protecting property rights and preventing intimidation." His eyes held hers steadily. "But yes, I considered Daniel a friend, and I'd like to help his niece if she'll allow it." Something about his frank manner cut through Katherine's usual reserve. "I'd be grateful for your help, Sheriff O'Connor. I'm afraid I'm rather out of my element." "You're doing fine so far," he assured her with a smile. "Better than fine. You've got Vince Harlow worried, and that's no small feat." The sound of the saloon's front doors swinging open interrupted their conversation. "That'll be the staff arriving to prepare for opening," Quinn explained. "Would you like to meet them?" Katherine straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I should introduce myself properly." As they returned to the main room, Katherine found 4 people had entered, 2 men setting up behind the bar, a woman arranging clean glasses, and an older man dusting off the piano keys. "Miss Nelson," Quinn called, drawing their attention. "I'd like to introduce you to the Silver Spur's employees." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and explanations. The bartenders, Frank and Thomas, had worked for her uncle for 5 and 3 years respectively. Sarah, the serving woman, had been there nearly a decade and knew every regular customer by name. And Josiah, the piano player, had been with the Silver Spur since it opened. "Your uncle was fair, Miss Nelson," Sarah told her as they sat at one of the tables. "Always paid on time, even when business was slow. Looked after us if we got sick or needed help." "I hope to continue that tradition," Katherine assured her. "I have no intention of making changes to the staff." Relief visibly washed over the woman's face. "That's good to hear." "When Mr. Harlow said there'd be a new owner coming from back east, we all worried." "Has Mr. Harlow been managing the saloon since my uncle's passing?" The employees exchanged glances before Thomas spoke up. "He's been handling the money and ordering supplies. Mayor Hamilton checks in once a week, supposedly on your behalf." Katherine filed this information away. "And has business been good?" "Steady," Frank replied. "Not what it was during the silver boom, but the Silver Spur still turns a profit. Only saloon in Oroville that does, now that the White Lily closed." Quinn, who had been quietly observing the conversation, added, "The town's changing. The big silver strike played out faster than people expected. Some miners have moved on, others are working reduced hours. The ranchers are becoming the economic backbone now." "I see," Katherine nodded thoughtfully. "And the Silver Spur has adapted to these changes. Your uncle was smart that way," Josiah said from his place at the piano. "Kept the drinks affordable, added decent meals when folks were struggling, hosted community events now and then. Made this place more than just somewhere to drink, made it a gathering spot." Katherine felt a growing respect for the uncle she'd never met. He'd built something that mattered to this community, something worth preserving. "I'd like to observe operations today," she announced. "I won't interfere, I simply want to understand how things work." "Of course, Miss Nelson," Sarah nodded. "We open in about an hour. I can show you the kitchen and storerooms before then if you'd like." "Thank you, Sarah. That would be helpful." As the staff returned to their preparations, Quinn moved closer to Katherine. "I should make my rounds, but I'll check in later. Will you be all right here?" "I believe so," Katherine replied, though uncertainty lingered beneath her confident exterior. "These seem like good people." "They are. Your uncle chose his staff carefully." Quinn hesitated, then added, "Watch out for Harlow when he returns. He usually handles the cash register during busy hours." "I certainly will." Katherine offered a small smile. "Thank you, Sheriff O'Connor." "Quinn," he corrected. "If we're going to be allies against Vince Harlow, you might as well use my first name." "Katherine," she responded, the familiarity feeling strangely right. He tipped his hat with a smile and headed for the doors, pausing to add, "Welcome to Oroville, Katherine. It might not look like much, but there's good in this town. Your uncle saw it. I hope you will too." After he left, Katherine stood in the middle of the saloon, taking in her inheritance with new eyes. This wasn't just a property to be liquidated, it was a living business with employees who depended on it and customers who valued it. Whatever she decided to do with the Silver Spur would affect real people's lives. The thought was both daunting and exhilarating. The Silver Spur Saloon came alive that evening in ways Katherine couldn't have imagined. By 7 o'clock, nearly every table was occupied, the air thick with tobacco smoke and conversation. Men in dusty work clothes mingled with merchants in slightly better attire, while Josiah's piano playing provided a lively backdrop to it all. Katherine watched from a small table in the corner, dressed in one of her plainer dresses, but still conspicuously out of place. She observed Sarah moving efficiently between tables, delivering drinks with a friendly word for each customer. Frank and Thomas worked in tandem behind the bar, pouring drinks and exchanging banter with the regulars. And Vince Harlow presided over it all from his position by the cash register, greeting preferred customers and watching the room with the air of a man in charge. Katherine made notes in a small leather-bound book, tracking which drinks were most popular and which tables filled first. She noticed how Harlow slipped certain payments directly into his pocket instead of the register, confirming her suspicions about his bookkeeping practices. "May I join you?" Looking up, Katherine found Quinn standing beside her table, hat in hand. Without his sheriff's star, he might have been any other patron, though his alert eyes gave him away as a man accustomed to watching for trouble. "Please do," she gestured to the empty chair. "Are you off duty, Sheriff?" "Quinn," he reminded her as he sat down. "And yes, though in a town this size, a sheriff is never truly off duty. Deputy Wilkins is making rounds tonight." Sarah appeared almost immediately with a glass of whiskey, which she placed before Quinn without being asked. "Your usual, Sheriff." "And can I get you anything, Miss Nelson?" "Just water, thank you, Sarah." When the server had gone, Katherine nodded toward Quinn's drink. "A regular customer, I see. I make a point of showing my face here a few nights a week," he explained. "Keeps trouble to a minimum, lets me hear the town gossip without looking like I'm prying." "Efficient," Katherine observed with approval. "How are you finding the saloon business so far?" "Fascinating," she admitted. "I've noticed Mr. Harlow has a rather creative approach to accounting." Quinn's lips twitched. "You've spotted that already, have you? Your uncle suspected the same but could never prove anything substantial." "Why didn't he simply dismiss Mr. Harlow?" "Politics," Quinn replied, keeping his voice low. "Harlow is connected to Mayor Hamilton and several council members. They've invested in various enterprises together. Your uncle knew that making an enemy of Harlow meant making enemies of half the town leadership." Katherine frowned. "So he tolerated theft. He minimized it. Kept his own set of books, limited Harlow's access to the safe, checked inventory himself." Quinn took a sip of his whiskey. "Daniel was shrewd. He played the game but protected what mattered." As they spoke, Katherine noticed the many glances directed their way. Some were merely curious, but others seemed disapproving or speculative. "They're still staring," she noted quietly. Quinn followed her gaze around the room. "You're a novelty, an educated Eastern woman who's inherited a saloon, and you're sitting with the sheriff. Of course they're staring." "It's rather uncomfortable. Let them stare," Quinn said with a warm smile. "You're the finest thing this town has seen in years, and they know it." Katherine felt her cheeks warm at the repeated compliment. "You've used that line before, Sheriff." "It's still true," he replied, his eyes holding hers. "And sometimes the truth bears repeating." Their moment was interrupted as Vince Harlow approached the table, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Miss Nelson, I'm pleased to see you taking an interest in the business," he said smoothly. "Though I must say, a lady seated alone in a saloon might give the wrong impression." "She's not alone," Quinn pointed out mildly. Harlow's smile tightened. "Of course not. Our sheriff is always attentive to newcomers." He turned back to Katherine. "I hope you're finding our operation satisfactory." "Your uncle built quite a respectable establishment." "Indeed he did," Katherine agreed. "I'm particularly interested in the financial aspects. Perhaps tomorrow we could review the past year's records together. I noticed some entries I'd like clarified." Something flashed in Harlow's eyes, alarm quickly masked. "Certainly. Though I should warn you, frontier bookkeeping might seem irregular compared to Eastern practices. We face unique challenges here." "I'm a quick study, Mr. Harlow. I'm sure I'll adapt to these unique practices." Harlow's jaw tightened momentarily before he forced another smile. "Until tomorrow, then. Enjoy your evening." As he walked away, Quinn whistled softly. "You don't waste time, do you?" "Time is a luxury I can't afford if he's been systematically stealing from my inheritance," Katherine replied. "I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with before deciding my next steps." "What are you considering?" Katherine hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach with Quinn. "When I left Boston, I intended to sell the saloon as quickly as possible. My parents expected me to review the property, find a buyer, and return home within a month. And now I'm not certain." She looked around the busy room. "This place matters to people. It employs good workers. It might be profitable with proper management." "You're considering staying," Quinn observed, surprise evident in his voice. "Perhaps. At least long enough to set things right." Katherine met his gaze directly. "What would you advise, as someone who knows this town and knew my uncle?" Quinn considered the question seriously. "I think Daniel would want you to make your own decision, based on what's best for your future. But I also think he left the Silver Spur to you for a reason, not just as property, but as a legacy." Before Katherine could respond, a commotion erupted near the bar. Two miners were squared off, their voices raised in anger about some perceived slight. Quinn was on his feet immediately. "Excuse me," he said to Katherine, then moved swiftly toward the disturbance. Katherine watched as he inserted himself between the men, speaking calmly but firmly. Whatever he said diffused the situation quickly, with one miner retreating to a table in the corner while the other grudgingly returned to his drink at the bar. When Quinn returned to their table, Katherine couldn't hide her admiration. "That was impressive." He shrugged. "Most men don't actually want to fight. They just need a face-saving way to back down. You've clearly had practice." "Part of the job," he agreed. "Your uncle was good at it too, had a way of talking men down before I ever needed to get involved." The mention of her uncle brought Katherine back to the matter at hand. "Tell me more about him. What kind of man was he beyond what the ledgers show?" Quinn settled back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Daniel Nelson was complicated. Tough when he needed to be, but generous too. He extended credit to minors when the payroll was late, helped widows keep their homes when times got hard. He smiled at some memory. He started a small lending library in the back room for the town's children. Said just because Oroville was on the frontier didn't mean its children should grow up ignorant. A lending library. In a saloon. Katherine couldn't hide her surprise. Only open during daylight hours before the drinking crowd arrived, Quinn clarified. Your uncle valued education. Said he regretted not having more of it himself. Katherine felt a growing connection to this man. She'd never met this uncle who'd created something meaningful in a rough frontier town, who'd kept a picture of her parents despite their estrangement, who'd valued books and learning. I wish I'd known him, she said softly. He would have liked you, Quinn assured her. He valued directness and intelligence. You clearly have both. Their conversation continued as the evening progressed, with Quinn sharing stories about Oroville and its inhabitants. Katherine learned about the silver discovery that had founded the town, the boom years when the population had swelled to nearly 5,000 souls, and the gradual decline as the richest veins played out. Now, with around 2,000 residents, Oroville was settling into a new identity as a regional trading center and ranching hub. The town will survive, Quinn explained. It's more established than most mining camps. We have proper businesses, a school, a church. People have put down roots here. Including you, Katherine asked. Quinn nodded. I came for the silver rush 10 years ago. Failed spectacularly as a miner, he added with a self-deprecating smile. Turned out I had more talent for keeping order than finding ore. Been sheriff for 6 years now. And you stayed even after the boom ended. This is home now, he said simply. I believe in Oroville's future. As the evening wore on, Katherine noticed the crowd thinning. By 11 o'clock, only a few tables remained occupied, mostly by men engaged in serious card games. Sarah looked tired as she collected empty glasses, and Josiah had slowed his piano playing to more mellow tunes. I should let you rest, Quinn said, noticing Katherine stifle a yawn. It's been a long day for you. Yes, I suppose it has, she agreed. Thank you for your company and for answering my questions. You've given me much to think about. Will you be comfortable staying here tonight? Your uncle's room is secure, but I could escort you to the hotel if you prefer. Katherine considered the option but shook her head. I'll stay here. It seems important to establish myself in the building from the start. Quinn nodded in approval. Smart thinking. I'll walk you to the back door then. It leads directly to your uncle's quarters without going through the main room. After bidding the staff good night, Katherine followed Quinn through the kitchen to a door that opened onto a small back alley. To her surprise, a sturdy fence enclosed a tiny garden where herbs and vegetables grew in neat rows. Your uncle's pride and joy, Quinn explained, seeing her interest. He said fresh ingredients made all the difference in the stew they serve at lunchtime. Mrs. Abernathy has been tending it since he passed. Inside her uncle's quarters, Quinn checked the locks on the windows and doors. You'll be safe here, but keep this handy just in case, he said, placing a small revolver on the bedside table. Katherine eyed the weapon warily. I've never fired a gun. It's loaded, but there's no need to use it. Just having it visible will deter most trouble. His expression turned serious. Katherine, you've challenged Harlow today. He won't take that lightly. Be careful around him. I will, she promised. And tomorrow I intend to examine those books more thoroughly. I have duties in the morning, but I'll check on you by midday. He hesitated at the door. Lock this behind me. After Quinn left, Katherine secured the door and leaned against it, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. The small room felt both foreign and oddly comfortable, a space that reflected a man she was beginning to respect despite never having met him. As she prepared for bed, Catherine's thoughts drifted between the business challenges ahead and the unexpected ally she'd found in Sheriff Quinn O'Connor. His steady presence had made her first day in Oroville far less daunting than it might have been. With the distant sounds of the saloon closing for the night as her lullaby, Katherine fell into a deep sleep, dreaming of silver mines and piano music, and a pair of storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her Boston reserve. Morning came with the sounds of Oroville, awakening wagons rattling down the street, shopkeepers calling greetings to each other, and the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Katherine dressed in a practical skirt and shirtwaist, pinning her hair in a simpler style than she would have worn in Boston. After washing her face in the basin, she felt ready to face her second day as a saloon owner. The main room was empty when she entered, though she could hear movement in the kitchen. Following the sounds, she found Sarah preparing coffee and a simple breakfast of biscuits and bacon. "Good morning, Miss Nelson," the woman greeted her with surprise. "I didn't expect you'd be up so early." "Good morning, Sarah. I'm an early riser by habit," Katherine explained. "And please call me Katherine." Sarah looked uncertain about the familiarity but nodded. "There's coffee ready if you'd like some." "Thank you." "I was hoping to review the kitchen operations and supplies before the day begins." Over the next hour, Sarah showed Katherine the kitchen setup, explaining how they served simple meals at midday, usually stew or beans with fresh bread, and lighter fare in the evenings. The prices were modest, designed to encourage miners to spend their money on food as well as drink. "Your uncle always said a man with a full stomach drinks less, but comes back more often," Sarah explained, "and causes less trouble besides." By 9 o'clock, Thomas arrived to prepare the bar, and Katherine took the opportunity to ask him to show her the stockroom. The liquor inventory was substantial, with several barrels of whiskey, crates of beer, and bottles of more expensive spirits for wealthier customers. "We get shipments monthly from Cheyenne," Thomas explained as Katherine made notes. "Mr. Harlow handles the ordering now." "I'll be taking over that responsibility," Katherine informed him. "Please let me know when supplies run low." Thomas looked relieved rather than offended by this announcement. "Yes, madam. To be honest, we've been having some inconsistencies with the deliveries lately." "What sort of inconsistencies?" The bartender hesitated. "Sometimes we get less than what's listed on the invoice." "Mr. Harlow says it's breakage during shipping, but you suspect otherwise," Katherine finished for him. Thomas nodded cautiously. "Your uncle was particular about checking every delivery himself." "I'll do the same," Katherine assured him. "Thank you for your honesty, Thomas. I value loyalty to the Silver Spur." By the time Frank and Josiah arrived, Katherine had compiled a substantial list of questions about the business operations. She sat up at a table with the account books Harlow had shown her the previous day, plus additional ledgers she'd found in her uncle's desk. The differences between the two sets of books were revealing. While Harlow's records showed modest profits, her uncle's private accounts indicated the business was substantially more profitable. The discrepancies were cleverly disguised slightly inflated costs here, underreported sales there, but together they amounted to significant sums being skimmed from the business. Katherine was so absorbed in her analysis that she didn't notice Vince Harlow's arrival until his shadow fell across her papers. "Good morning, Miss Nelson," he said, his tone professionally cordial though his eyes narrowed at the spread of documents before her. "I see you've been busy already." "Mr. Harlow," she acknowledged, deliberately not closing the ledgers. "Yes, I've been familiarizing myself with the business details. I have several questions I hope you can clarify." Harlow glanced around the empty saloon, then pulled out a chair. "Of course." though I'm surprised to see you've located some of your uncle's personal records. I wasn't aware they were still on the premises." "They were in his desk," Katherine replied, watching Harlow's face carefully. "I found them quite illuminating, especially when compared to the official books you showed me yesterday." A muscle twitched in Harlow's jaw, but his expression remained composed. "Your uncle had his own system of record-keeping. Rather old-fashioned and not always accurate, I'm afraid. That's why I implemented more modern methods." "Indeed. Yet his old-fashioned records show consistent discrepancies with your modern ones. For instance, this entry from April." Katherine turned one of the ledgers toward him. "Your books show we purchased 20 cases of whiskey at $6 per case. My uncle's records show the actual price was $4.50 per case. That's a difference of $30 on one transaction alone." Harlow's smile tightened. "Transportation costs, Miss Nelson. Your uncle didn't always account for them separately. Except he did, right here." Katherine pointed to another entry. "And similar discrepancies appear throughout: higher reported costs, lower reported sales. Quite systematic, in fact." Harlow's facade of affability slipped momentarily. "You're making serious implications, Miss Nelson. I've managed this business faithfully since your uncle's passing. And before that, it seems you managed to divert a portion of the profits into your own pocket," Katherine replied evenly. "By my calculations, approximately $200 per month." Harlow leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. I have connections in this town you can't imagine. Are you threatening me, Mr. Harlow?" "I'm advising you to be reasonable. We could be partners. The arrangement would benefit us both." "I'm not interested in a partnership based on dishonesty," Katherine replied. "I intend to run the Silver Spur properly, with accurate books and without theft." Harlow's face flushed with anger. "You'll regret this approach, Miss Nelson. A woman alone can't succeed in this business, especially one who makes enemies of influential men. Is everything all right here?" They both looked up to find Quinn standing at the table, his expression carefully neutral though his hand rested near his holstered pistol. Harlow stood abruptly. "Sheriff, we were just discussing business matters." "Sounded more like threats from where I was standing," Quinn observed mildly. "A misunderstanding," Harlow insisted, straightening his vest. "Miss Nelson is new to our ways and misinterpreted my concerns for her welfare." Katherine met Harlow's gaze steadily. "Mr. Harlow was explaining his view of our potential business relationship. I was declining his offer." "I see," Quinn said, his eyes never leaving Harlow. "And now that business is concluded." Harlow's lips pressed into a thin line as he looked between Katherine and the sheriff. "This isn't over, Miss Nelson. We'll speak again when you've had time to reconsider your position." With a curt nod to Quinn, he strode out of the saloon, letting the doors swing violently behind him. Quinn took the seat Harlow had vacated. "That looked intense." "He's been stealing from the business," Katherine explained, showing Quinn the discrepancies in the books. "Quite systematically, and for some time, it appears." Quinn examined the ledgers with a frown. Daniel suspected as much but could never prove it definitively. He kept Harlow around partly to keep an eye on him and partly because of his political connections. "Well, I have no interest in such an arrangement," Katherine declared. "I won't have a thief as a business partner." "Harlow won't take this lightly," Quinn warned. "He has friends on the town council and influence with some of the local merchants. He could make things difficult for you." Katherine's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm not easily intimidated, Sheriff." "Quinn," he reminded her with a small smile, "and I'm beginning to see that. Still, be careful. Harlow's been in Oroville for 8 years. People listen when he talks." Then I'll need to give them reason to listen to me instead, Katherine replied thoughtfully. My uncle built this business on reputation and fairness. I intend to continue that tradition. Quinn studied her with undisguised admiration. You're nothing like what people expected, you know. What did they expect? An Eastern socialite who'd sell the place immediately and flee back to civilization, he admitted. Instead, they got a woman with backbone and business sense. Katherine smiled despite herself. My father believed daughters should understand finance as well as sons. My mother thought it would make me unmarriageable, but father said it would ensure I'd never be at the mercy of an unscrupulous husband. Wise man, Quinn commented. Yes, though it's ironic that his teachings are now being applied to a saloon in Wyoming rather than a Boston merchant's business. Katherine gathered the ledgers, her expression turning serious. What will Harlow do now? Quinn considered the question. First, he'll try to rally support among his friends. Mayor Hamilton, Councilman Porter, perhaps Judge Wilson, they've all invested in ventures with Harlow before. He'll paint you as an outsider threatening the town's established order. And then, if that doesn't work, he might try more direct methods of persuasion. Quinn's expression darkened. Harlow isn't known for violence himself, but he has associates who are less scrupulous. Katherine absorbed this information with outward calm, though her heart quickened at the implication. I see. I don't mean to frighten you, Quinn added quickly, but you should know what you're facing. I appreciate your honesty, Katherine replied. Now, I believe I need to meet with my staff and inform them of changes to the management structure. Quinn raised an eyebrow. You're moving quickly. Is there any advantage to delay? Harlow will work against me regardless. Better to establish my authority immediately. Quinn nodded, a smile playing at his lips. Daniel would have approved of your approach, direct and decisive. The meeting with the staff went better than Katherine had anticipated. Sarah, Thomas, Frank, and Josiah listened attentively as she explained that she would be taking full control of the business operations, with their continued employment guaranteed at their current wages. Mr. Harlow will no longer be associated with the Silver Spur, she informed them. If he attempts to give you instructions or access the premises after hours, please inform me or Sheriff O'Connor immediately. Instead of concern, she saw relief in their expressions. Your uncle didn't trust him toward the end, Josiah confided after the others had returned to their duties. Told me to watch Harlow with the cash box when he wasn't around. Did you see him take money? Katherine asked. The piano player nodded slowly. Small amounts here and there, nothing I could prove definite like, but enough to notice the pattern. Thank you for your honesty, Josiah. I value loyalty to this business. By noon, Katherine had implemented her first changes, a new system for recording sales, and a requirement that 2 people count the cash drawer at closing. She also announced that she would personally receive all supply deliveries and verify them against invoices. The saloon opened on schedule, with a small lunchtime crowd of miners and shopkeepers filing in for the daily stew and cornbread. Katherine made a point of introducing herself to each customer, learning names and occupations with genuine interest. You have a good memory for details, Quinn observed when he stopped by during his midday rounds. You've remembered everyone you've met so far. A useful skill in business, Katherine replied. People appreciate being recognized. As promised, she took her place at the back of the room during the evening rush, observing operations and taking notes. Without Harlow manning the cash register, Sarah and Thomas took turns handling payments, with Katherine checking the totals periodically. The night was busier than her first evening in Oroville, with miners from the afternoon shift filling most tables and ranchers from outlying properties occupying others. Katherine noticed the different social groupings miners clustered together, ranch hands in their own section, merchants and professionals at the better tables near the small stage. Quinn appeared around 8 o'clock, this time in his official capacity. He made a circuit of the room, exchanging greetings with patrons and keeping a watchful eye on potential troublemakers. When he reached Katherine's table, he touched his hat respectfully. "Evening, Miss Nelson. Any problems so far?" "None at all, Sheriff. Business is brisk tonight." "Payday at the mine," he explained. "First shift got their wages this afternoon. Second shift gets paid tomorrow, so expect another busy night." As they spoke, the saloon doors swung open to admit a group of well-dressed men. Katherine recognized Mayor Hamilton from Sarah's description, a portly man with an impressive mustache and an air of self-importance. With him were two other men who carried themselves with the confidence of authority. "Town council members," Quinn murmured. "Porter and Wilson. Harlow's been busy." The men surveyed the room before spotting Katherine. After a brief conference, Mayor Hamilton approached her table, the others following in his wake. "Miss Nelson," he greeted her with a practiced smile. "I've been meaning to pay my respects since your arrival. I'm Mayor George Hamilton. These are Councilman Porter and Judge Wilson." Katherine rose and extended her hand with the poise her mother had drilled into her through years of Boston social events. "Mayor Hamilton, gentlemen, I'm pleased to meet you." If the mayor was surprised by her composure, he hid it well. "We understood you might be returning east soon. Vince Harlow mentioned you were considering selling the Silver Spur." "Mr. Harlow is mistaken," Katherine replied smoothly. "I've decided to remain in Oroville and manage my inheritance personally." The three men exchanged glances. "That's unexpected," Porter commented. "Running a saloon is hardly suitable employment for a lady of your background." "On the contrary, I find it perfectly suitable," Katherine countered. "My father ensured I was well-versed in business management." The Silver Spur is simply a business that happens to serve alcohol among its offerings. Judge Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Vince Harlow has been instrumental in keeping this establishment profitable. I hope you recognize his value to your operation." "I've reviewed the business records thoroughly," Katherine replied, her tone pleasant but firm. "Mr. Harlow's contributions are well documented in the accounts." Quinn suppressed a smile at her careful phrasing, while the judge looked momentarily uncertain. Mayor Hamilton cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could discuss this further in private, Miss Nelson. There are aspects of doing business in Oroville that might not be immediately apparent to someone new to our community." "I would welcome any insights you might offer, Mayor," Katherine agreed. "Perhaps you could join me for lunch tomorrow, say noon." Slightly off balance at having his suggestion redirected, the mayor nodded. "Yes, that would be acceptable." "Excellent. I look forward to it." Katherine smiled graciously, effectively dismissing them. As the men retreated to a table across the room, Quinn leaned closer. "That was skillfully handled." "Boston social training has its uses," Katherine replied quietly. "Always maintain control of the interaction," Mother would say. "Your mother would be impressed." "You just outmaneuvered the three most powerful men in town." Katherine glanced toward their table, where the men were engaged in intense discussion. "This is only the beginning, I suspect. They'll try other approaches." "Undoubtedly," Quinn agreed. "But you've made it clear you won't be easily intimidated, which changes their calculations." As the evening progressed, Katherine continued to observe the saloon operations while maintaining a watchful eye on the town officials across the room. They ordered expensive brandy and spoke in low voices, occasionally glancing in her direction. Around 10 o'clock, the mayor's party departed, with only a curt nod in Katherine's direction. Shortly afterward, Quinn approached her table again. I'm heading out to check the rest of the town, he explained. Will you be all right here? Perfectly fine, Katherine assured him. The staff has been wonderful and business is running smoothly. Quinn seemed reluctant to leave. Harlow might make another appearance. I'm prepared for that possibility, Katherine replied, discreetly indicating the small revolver tucked into her skirt pocket. Though I doubt he'll try anything in a crowded room. You're probably right, Quinn conceded. Still, I'll stop by before closing time. After he left, Katherine continued her observations, making notes about customer patterns and drink preferences. The more she learned about the business, the more she appreciated her uncle's approach. The Silver Spur was well run, with systems designed to maximize profits while maintaining a respectable atmosphere by frontier standards. As promised, Quinn returned shortly before midnight as the crowd was thinning. He found Katherine in conversation with an elderly miner who was explaining the history of the silver strike that had founded Oroville. Evening, Elijah, Quinn greeted the old man, giving Miss Nelson a history lesson. Someone ought to, Elijah replied with a gap-toothed smile. Young folks these days don't appreciate what it took to build this town. Miss Nelson here actually listens, unlike most. I find it fascinating, Katherine assured him. Please continue your story about the winter of '63. The old miner beamed with pleasure and launched back into his tale of survival during a particularly harsh winter when supplies couldn't reach the isolated mining camp. Katherine listened with genuine interest, asking questions that delighted the elderly storyteller. Quinn watched the interaction with growing admiration. In just 2 days, Katherine Nelson had begun winning over the townspeople one by one. First her staff, now the old-timers like Elijah who carried the town's history. It was a subtle but effective counter to Harlow's influence. By the time Elijah finished his story and bid them good night, the saloon was nearly empty. Sarah and Thomas were cleaning up, while Frank counted the evening's receipts under Katherine's new 2-person system. A successful night, Katherine observed as Quinn joined her near the bar. Better than yesterday, according to Sarah. Word's getting around that Daniel Nelson's niece is running the place herself, Quinn explained. People are curious to see the Eastern lady who's taken over the Silver Spur. I hope they'll eventually come for the quality of our service rather than curiosity about me, Katherine replied. They will, Quinn assured her. The Silver Spur has always been the best saloon in town. Under your management, I suspect it will only improve. Frank approached with the cash box. All counted, Miss Nelson. $217, which matches the sales records exactly. Thank you, Frank. Please lock it in the safe as we discussed. After the bartender departed, Quinn raised an eyebrow. Already implementing new procedures. Simple ones, Katherine acknowledged. Accurate record keeping, 2-person verification, secure storage, basic business practices that should have been in place all along. Harlow won't like being cut out of the money handling. Mr. Harlow no longer has any say in how this business is operated, Katherine stated firmly. Quinn studied her with undisguised admiration. You've accomplished more in 2 days than most would manage in 2 weeks. I'm impressed. Katherine felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. Thank you, but I've barely begun. Tomorrow I meet with the mayor and then I need to review our supply arrangements. The current vendors may be complicit in Harlow's schemes. One step at a time, Quinn advised. You've already made significant changes. As the staff finished closing procedures, Katherine and Quinn moved toward the back door that led to her quarters. The night air was cool after the warmth of the saloon, and Katherine drew her shawl closer around her shoulders. Thank you for checking in this evening, she said as they reached her door. Your support has been invaluable. Just doing my job, Quinn replied, though his expression suggested more personal interest than professional duty. Katherine hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why are you helping me, Quinn? Beyond your official capacity, I mean." He considered her question seriously. "I respected your uncle. He was a good man trying to do right in a place where that isn't always easy." Quinn's gray eyes met hers directly. "And I admire what you're doing, taking on this challenge instead of selling out and returning east. It shows character." The sincerity in his voice touched her more deeply than flowery compliments ever could. "That means a great deal coming from you." They stood in silence for a moment, the connection between them growing stronger in the quiet night. Finally, Quinn cleared his throat. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." "Yes," Katherine agreed, though she felt reluctant to end their conversation. "Good night, Quinn." "Good night, Katherine. Lock your door." As she secured the door behind her, Katherine found herself thinking not about ledgers or business strategies, but about the quiet strength of the man who had become her most trusted ally in Oroville. There was something about Quinn O'Connor that made her feel both protected and respected, a rare combination that her Boston suitors had never managed to achieve. With these thoughts warming her more than her small stove, Katherine prepared for bed, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring to her new life in Wyoming. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the distant mountains visible against the blue Wyoming sky. Katherine rose early again, reviewing her notes and preparing for her meeting with Mayor Hamilton. She dressed with care in a dark blue skirt and white shirtwaist that struck a balance between Eastern refinement and Western practicality. Sarah arrived at 7 to begin preparations for the day, expressing surprise again at finding Katherine already awake and working. "Most folks who can afford to sleep late do so," the server commented as she put coffee on to brew. "I find morning hours productive," Katherine replied. "Besides, there's something inspiring about watching a town come to life." By 10 o'clock, Katherine had reviewed the previous day's receipts, confirming that the new accounting procedures were working properly. The difference was already apparent without Harlow's skimming. The Silver Spur's daily profits were nearly 20% higher than reported in his books. Katherine was making notes about potential improvements to the menu when Quinn stopped by, his expression unusually serious. "Morning," he greeted her. "How are preparations for your meeting with the mayor coming along?" "Well enough," Katherine replied, noticing his concern. "Is something wrong?" Quinn glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Just wanted to warn you, Harlow spent last night buying drinks at the Rusty Nail, the other saloon in town." "What's left of it," Quinn confirmed. "It's barely staying afloat. Anyway, Harlow was talking openly about your interference in business arrangements that predate your arrival. Said you were disrupting established community relationships." Katherine's brow furrowed. "He's trying to turn public opinion against me." "Trying," Quinn emphasized. "But most folks are reserving judgment. Daniel was well respected and you're his blood. That counts for something in Oroville. Still, I should prepare for resistance from the mayor and his associates." Quinn nodded. "They'll try to convince you that Harlow's connections are essential to your success. Don't believe it. The Silver Spur thrived because of your uncle's reputation for fair dealing, not Harlow's political maneuvering." "Thank you for the warning," Katherine said, genuinely grateful for his insight. "Will you be around this afternoon?" "I have to ride out to the Patterson Ranch. There's been some trouble with cattle rustling, but I should be back by evening." Quinn hesitated, then added, "Be careful with Hamilton. He's not a bad man at heart, but he's easily influenced by stronger personalities like Harlow." "I'll keep that in mind," Katherine promised. After Quinn left, Katherine continued her preparations, reviewing financial information and rehearsing her arguments for taking full control of the Silver Spur. By noon, the saloon had opened for the lunchtime trade, with the aroma of Sarah's beef stew filling the main room. Mayor Hamilton arrived promptly, alone this time, dressed in a suit that had once been fine but now showed signs of wear at the cuffs and collar. Katherine greeted him cordially and led him to a table she had reserved in a quiet corner. "Thank you for joining me, Mayor Hamilton," she said as Sarah served them each a bowl of stew and a plate of fresh bread. "I'm eager to learn more about Oroville from someone with your experience." Hamilton seemed slightly disarmed by her politeness. "Yes, well, I've been mayor for 6 years now, seen this town through good times and lean ones. I understand the silver mines are producing less than in previous years," Katherine prompted, serving herself a slice of bread. "That's right," Hamilton confirmed, his expression turning somber. "The easy silver's mostly played out. What's left requires more effort and investment to extract. Some of the smaller operations have closed entirely. And how is the town adapting to these changes?" The mayor looked surprised by the question. "Adapting? Well, that is to say," he collected himself. "The ranching industry is growing, cattle do well in the surrounding grasslands, and we're still a supply point for travelers heading further west." Katherine nodded thoughtfully. "My uncle seems to have anticipated these shifts. The Silver Spur offers meals as well as drinks, serving ranchers and merchants alongside miners." "Daniel was forward-thinking," Hamilton acknowledged, though in recent years he relied heavily on Vince Harlow's business connections. There it was, the opening Katherine had been expecting. "Yes, Mr. Harlow has mentioned his contributions. I've reviewed them carefully in the business records." The mayor shifted uncomfortably. "Vince has been instrumental in securing favorable terms with suppliers and navigating the complexities of territorial regulations." "I'm sure he has," Katherine replied, her tone neutral. "However, I've discovered certain irregularities in the accounting that concern me." Hamilton's eyes widened slightly. "Irregularities?" Katherine produced a small notebook where she had copied specific examples. "For instance, liquor purchases consistently recorded at higher prices than actually paid, with the difference unaccounted for. And regular payments to unnamed parties for undefined services." The mayor's face flushed. "Business practices in the West differ from Eastern standards, Miss Nelson. Certain arrangements are customary." "Theft is theft, Mayor Hamilton, regardless of geography," Katherine stated firmly but without heat. "I cannot and will not continue such arrangements under my management." Hamilton dabbed his mustache with a napkin, clearly flustered. "Miss Nelson, you must understand that Vince Harlow has connections throughout the territory. Supplies, transportation, even certain legal matters. His influence ensures the Silver Spur operates without interference." "Are you suggesting that without Mr. Harlow's involvement, my business might face official obstacles?" Katherine asked directly. The mayor looked alarmed at her bluntness. "Not at all. I merely point out the practical realities of doing business in Oroville." "I appreciate your concern," Katherine replied, softening her tone slightly. "However, I intend to operate the Silver Spur honestly and transparently. If that creates challenges with certain suppliers or officials, I'll find alternative solutions." Hamilton studied her with newfound wariness. "You're not what we expected, Miss Nelson." "So I've been told," Katherine acknowledged with a small smile. "Mayor Hamilton, I didn't invite you here to create conflict. Rather, I hope to establish a positive relationship with Oroville's leadership." "And what exactly do you propose?" "A fresh start," Katherine replied simply. The Silver Spur will continue serving this community as it has for years, providing jobs, tax revenue, and a gathering place. All I ask is fair treatment from the town government, the same consideration any legitimate business deserves." The mayor considered her words, his expression thoughtful. "And Harlow, Mr. Harlow is no longer affiliated with the Silver Spur," Katherine stated firmly. "Any arrangements he made claiming to represent this establishment are null and void." Hamilton sighed heavily. "He won't take this lightly, you know. Vince has invested years in building his position here." "His position was built partly on misappropriating funds from my uncle's business," Katherine pointed out. "I cannot in good conscience allow that to continue." The mayor ate a spoonful of stew, using the moment to gather his thoughts. "This puts me in an awkward position, Miss Nelson." "I understand that," Katherine acknowledged. "But surely as mayor, your primary concern is the well-being of Oroville and its legitimate businesses." Hamilton couldn't argue with that framing without undermining his own position. "Of course," he agreed grudgingly, "though I foresee complications." "Change often brings complications," Katherine observed, "but also opportunities." The Silver Spur will continue to be a cornerstone of Main Street, employing local people and serving quality food and drink. Those fundamentals remain unchanged. By the time they finished their meal, Mayor Hamilton seemed less hostile, though still wary. Katherine had carefully avoided making him choose sides directly, instead emphasizing their shared interest in Oroville's prosperity. "Thank you for your time, Mayor," Katherine said as they concluded their meeting. "I hope we can work together productively in the future." Hamilton nodded, more thoughtful than when he'd arrived. "You've given me much to consider, Miss Nelson. Your uncle would have appreciated your directness, I think." After the mayor departed, Katherine allowed herself a moment of relief. The confrontation had gone better than expected, though she harbored no illusions that her problems with Harlow were solved. If anything, today's meeting had merely established her position more clearly. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity as Katherine continued implementing changes to the saloon's operations. She met with suppliers, reviewed inventory, and further refined the accounting procedures. By evening, when the Silver Spur began filling with its regular crowd, she felt a growing confidence in her understanding of the business. Vince Harlow made no appearance that night, which both relieved and concerned Katherine. His absence meant no immediate confrontation, but she suspected he was planning his next move carefully. Quinn returned from his duties at the Patterson Ranch around 8 o'clock, looking tired but satisfied. He made his usual circuit of the room before joining Katherine at her table. "Rustlers?" she inquired, noting the dust on his clothes. "Caught 2 of them red-handed," he confirmed. "They're cooling their heels in the jail now, waiting for the circuit judge next week." His eyes surveyed her face carefully. "How did your meeting with Hamilton go?" Katherine gave him a brief account of the conversation. "I think I made my position clear without turning him into an outright enemy." "Skillfully done," Quinn approved. "Hamilton's not a bad sort, just weak-willed. If he sees you succeeding without Harlow's involvement, he'll adjust his thinking." "And in the meantime," Quinn's expression turned serious. "In the meantime, Harlow will be looking for ways to undermine you. He spent the day in meetings with his associates' merchants, the stage company manager, even the bank president." Katherine absorbed this news with outward calm, though inwardly she felt a flutter of anxiety. "He's trying to organize opposition to my management." "Trying," Quinn emphasized, "but he's finding less support than he expected." "Your uncle had more friends than enemies in this town, and that goodwill extends to you at least provisionally." The next few days fell into a pattern. Katherine rose early, managed the Silver Spur's operations during the day, and observed the evening business from her corner table. True to Quinn's prediction, Harlow worked behind the scenes to create difficulties. Deliveries arrived late or incomplete. The bank questioned her authority to access the business accounts, and rumors circulated about an Eastern woman's inability to manage a frontier establishment. Yet for each obstacle, Katherine found a solution. When the regular liquor supplier couldn't deliver her full order, she arranged an alternative source through a merchant in Cheyenne who had respected her uncle. When the bank delayed her transactions, she began keeping more cash on hand and dealing directly with vendors. And she countered the rumors by making herself visible and accessible to the townspeople, learning names and showing genuine interest in local concerns. Quinn supported her throughout, offering advice and occasional intervention when needed, but mostly allowing Katherine to establish herself on her own terms. Their friendship deepened through shared challenges and quiet conversations during the less busy hours at the saloon. On the fifth evening after Katherine's arrival in Oroville, Quinn joined her at her usual table with an expression that immediately caught her attention. "What's happened?" she asked without preamble. "Harlow's made his move," Quinn replied, keeping his voice low. "He's filed a legal claim against you, asserting that he has a verbal partnership agreement with your uncle that entitles him to half ownership of the Silver Spur." Katherine had been expecting something of this nature. "Does he have any evidence?" "He's produced 3 witnesses who claim they heard Daniel discuss a partnership arrangement. Judge Wilson has scheduled a hearing for next Monday." "Judge Wilson," Katherine repeated thoughtfully. "The same Judge Wilson who dined with Harlow and the mayor my second night here." Quinn nodded grimly. "The same. He and Harlow are longtime associates." "So I face a biased judge and false witnesses," Katherine summarized. Not the most promising legal position. To her surprise, Quinn smiled slightly. "Don't count yourself out yet. Judge Wilson may be friends with Harlow, but he's also conscious of his reputation, and I've been making some inquiries of my own." "What sort of inquiries?" Quinn glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Your uncle suspected Harlow might try something like this eventually. He left something with Martha Abernathy for safekeeping, said it was insurance against Vince's ambitions." Katherine's interest was immediately piqued. "What is it?" "Martha wouldn't tell me specifically, but she said she'd been waiting for the right moment to pass it to you." Quinn leaned closer. "She's coming by tomorrow morning. Said it was time Daniel's niece had all the facts." Hope kindled in Katherine's chest. "That sounds promising." "Just be prepared for the hearing regardless," Quinn advised. "Harlow plays to win, and he's had years to build his influence in this town." The next morning, Katherine was reviewing inventory when Sarah announced a visitor, Martha Abernathy, a sturdy woman in her 60s with silver hair and clear, intelligent eyes. "Miss Nelson," the older woman greeted her warmly. "I've been wanting to meet Daniel's niece properly." "Mrs. Abernathy," Katherine smiled, genuinely pleased. "I understand I have you to thank for maintaining my uncle's quarters after his passing. Please sit down." They settled at a table with coffee, and Martha studied Katherine with undisguised curiosity. "You have his eyes," she declared finally. "Same shape and determination in them." "Did you know my uncle well?" Katherine asked. 20 years, Martha confirmed. "Came to Oroville with my late husband during the first silver rush. Daniel was already here, building this place log by log." Her expression softened at the memory. "He was a good man, fair in his dealings and kind when it mattered." "I wish I'd known him," Katherine said quietly. "He wished that too," Martha replied. "Near the end, he talked about you sometimes. Said his brother sent him photographs over the years, even though they weren't on speaking terms." This revelation surprised Katherine. My father never mentioned corresponding with Uncle Daniel. Men and their pride, Martha sighed. Too stubborn to reconcile properly, but neither could quite let go. She reached into her bag and withdrew a small wooden box. Daniel asked me to keep this safe until you arrived. Said if Vince Harlow gave you trouble, this would help. Katherine accepted the box with reverent hands. It was crafted of polished walnut with a simple brass clasp. Inside, she found a sealed envelope and a small leather-bound journal. He kept records of everything Harlow did, Martha explained. Started the day Vince first proposed their partnership. Daniel didn't trust him from the beginning but played along to learn what Vince was really after. Katherine opened the envelope first, finding a letter in her uncle's clear, precise handwriting. To my niece Katherine, if you are reading this, then I am gone and Vince Harlow is causing trouble over the Silver Spur, as I anticipated he might. Know this, I never entered into any partnership with Harlow, verbal or otherwise. He proposed such an arrangement many times, but I always declined. The enclosed journal documents his activities over the past 3 years, the discrepancies in the accounts, his political maneuvering, and the witnesses he has cultivated to support his false claims. I recorded dates, amounts, and names that may prove useful should he attempt legal action. The Silver Spur is yours free and clear. Do with it what you think best, but don't let Harlow steal what I built through decades of honest work. Your Uncle Daniel Nelson. Tears pricked Katherine's eyes at this message from the uncle she'd never met. His foresight and care touched her deeply. He knew, she said softly. He knew Harlow would try to take the saloon. Martha nodded. Daniel was no fool. He saw what Vince was after long before Vince realized he was being watched. Katherine opened the journal, finding meticulous records of Harlow's activities, transactions where money disappeared, conversations where Harlow claimed partnership status to suppliers, and notes about which town officials received special considerations from the saloon's resources. This is comprehensive, Katherine observed, paging through the detailed entries. My uncle was very thorough. He believed in being prepared, Martha confirmed. Daniel knew the kind of man Vince Harlow was, the kind who takes what isn't his by finding the angles and exploiting the gaps. This will help immensely with the hearing, Katherine said, already formulating her strategy. Mrs. Abernathy, would you be willing to testify about my uncle's statements to you, about his intention that I inherit the Silver Spur outright? That's why I'm here, dear, Martha replied with a determined smile. Daniel was my friend. I won't let Vince Harlow steal his legacy through lies. By the time Martha left, Katherine felt newly empowered. The journal provided exactly the evidence she needed to counter Harlow's claims, specific, detailed documentation that would be difficult to dismiss, even for a sympathetic judge. Quinn arrived shortly after noon, his face lighting up when Katherine showed him what Martha had brought. This is exactly what we need, he confirmed after reviewing the journal. With this and Martha's testimony, even Judge Wilson will have difficulty ruling in Harlow's favor. I should speak with a lawyer, Katherine realized. Is there someone in town I can trust? James Calloway, Quinn replied without hesitation. He's new to Oroville, just set up practice last year after studying law back east, not part of the old boys network that Harlow cultivates. Would you introduce us? This afternoon, Quinn promised. His office is just down the street. As they prepared to leave, Quinn paused, his expression turning serious. Katherine, Harlow will be desperate when he realizes you have this evidence. Be careful, stay where people can see you, don't go anywhere alone. The concern in his eyes warmed her. I will. Though I'm beginning to think I'm safer in Oroville than I expected to be. How so? Katherine smiled softly. I seem to have inherited not just my uncle's business but his friends as well, people like Martha Abernathy. And you." Quinn's eyes held hers for a long moment. "Your uncle would be proud of how you're handling all this. Taking on Harlow, learning the business, winning over the town bit by bit." "I couldn't have done it without your help," Katherine acknowledged. "You would have found a way," Quinn insisted. "You're stronger than you realize, Katherine Nelson." The sincerity in his voice made her heart beat faster. For a moment, the legal battles and business concerns faded into the background as something new and powerful flickered between them. The spell was broken when Sarah entered to announce that the first customers of the day had arrived. Katherine reluctantly turned her attention back to business matters, but the warmth of Quinn's gaze stayed with her throughout the afternoon. James Calloway proved to be exactly the ally Katherine needed, a sharp-minded lawyer in his early 30s who had grown tired of the cutthroat legal environment in Chicago and sought a simpler life in Wyoming Territory. He reviewed Daniel Nelson's journal and letter with keen interest, occasionally making notes and asking clarifying questions. "This is compelling evidence, Miss Nelson," he concluded. "Your uncle was wise to document Harlow's activities so thoroughly." "Will it be enough to counter his claim of a verbal partnership?" Katherine asked. Calloway nodded confidently. "A verbal contract requires evidence of agreement between parties. Harlow's witnesses can claim they heard discussions of partnership, but this journal clearly states your uncle repeatedly declined such arrangements." He tapped the leather cover thoughtfully. "Moreover, the documented pattern of financial mismanagement undermines Harlow's credibility significantly." "Judge Wilson is Harlow's friend," Quinn reminded him. "True," Calloway acknowledged. "But even friendly judges have limits to how far they'll bend the law, especially with written evidence and credible counter-witnesses." He smiled reassuringly at Katherine. "With Mrs. Abernathy's testimony about your uncle's intentions, plus these records, I believe we have a strong case." Katherine engaged Calloway's services on the spot, providing him with the journal and arranging to meet the following day to prepare their strategy for Monday's hearing. As they left the lawyer's office, she felt more confident than she had since arriving in Oroville. "That went well," Quinn observed as they walked back toward the Silver Spur. "Calloway's respected, even by Wilson and his crowd. Having him represent you lends additional credibility." "I'm grateful you suggested him," Katherine replied. "He seems thorough and principled." "Like someone else I know," Quinn remarked with a sidelong glance that made Katherine's cheeks warm. As they neared the saloon, Katherine noticed a small crowd gathered outside. Drawing closer, she saw Vince Harlow standing on the porch, addressing a group of townspeople with animated gestures. "What's happening?" she asked Quinn quietly. His expression darkened. "Looks like Harlow's decided to take his case to the court of public opinion." They approached slowly, catching Harlow's words as they drew near. "Undermining established business practices that have served Oroville well for years," he was saying. "Eastern notions might work in Boston parlors, but out here we have our own ways of doing things." Several in the crowd nodded agreement, though Katherine was heartened to see others looking skeptical. "Miss Nelson thinks she can waltz in and change everything overnight," Harlow continued, his voice carrying down the street. "But what does she know about running a business in Wyoming Territory? What does she understand about our community's needs?" "Perhaps you should ask me directly, Mr. Harlow," Katherine called out clearly, stepping forward, "rather than speculating about my intentions to others." The crowd parted as Katherine approached, Quinn a steady presence at her side. Harlow's expression flickered with momentary surprise before settling into a condescending smile. "Miss Nelson, how convenient. I was just explaining to our neighbors how your inexperience might impact the Silver Spur's place in our community. Yes, I heard your concerns, Katherine replied evenly. Though I wonder why you're discussing them on my property rather than bringing them to me personally. A murmur ran through the assembled townspeople. Harlow's smile tightened. The Silver Spur's ownership is precisely what's in question, as you well know. The hearing on Monday will determine whether your claim of a verbal partnership has any merit, Katherine finished for him. A claim my uncle explicitly refuted in writing before his death. This revelation caused another stir among the onlookers. Harlow's face flushed with anger. Your uncle and I had an understanding, he insisted. Ask anyone who knew him, like Mrs. Abernathy, Katherine suggested. She was quite clear about my uncle's intentions regarding the Silver Spur's ownership. Harlow's eyes narrowed dangerously. Martha Abernathy is a sentimental old woman who misunderstood business matters. That sentimental old woman was my friend's wife, called a voice from the crowd. An elderly man stepped forward, his weathered face set in disapproving lines. Daniel Nelson trusted her judgment more than most men's, Vince. If Martha says Daniel wanted his niece to have the saloon free and clear, that carries weight with me. Several others nodded agreement, and Katherine saw the tide of public opinion beginning to shift. Harlow recognized it too, his expression hardening as he glanced around the crowd. The legal hearing will settle this matter, he declared, stepping down from the porch. I suggest you all reserve judgment until Judge Wilson reviews the evidence. With a curt nod to Katherine and a glare at Quinn, he pushed through the dispersing crowd and strode away down the street. Well handled, Quinn murmured as they watched him go. You didn't lose your temper or stoop to his level. My mother always said dignity is more persuasive than volume, Katherine replied with a small smile. Though I confess, maintaining it was challenging. The impromptu gathering broke up quickly, with many of the townspeople nodding respectfully to Katherine as they departed. A few even stopped to express support, including the elderly man who had spoken up. Bert Johnson, Miss Nelson, he introduced himself. I prospected with your uncle back in '62. Daniel was a straight shooter. If he left you the Silver Spur, he meant for you to have it all. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, Katherine replied warmly. I appreciate your support. By the time they entered the saloon, Katherine felt a curious mix of tension and triumph. Harlow was clearly escalating his efforts to discredit her, yet each confrontation seemed to bring her new allies among the townspeople. Harlow's getting desperate, Quinn observed as they settled at Katherine's usual table. Public spectacles aren't his usual style. He prefers working behind the scenes. The Journal must have him worried, Katherine reasoned. Perhaps he's heard that Martha brought me something from my uncle. Likely, Quinn agreed. Oroville's small enough that news travels fast. If Martha mentioned her plans to anyone, Harlow would know by now. Their conversation was interrupted as Thomas approached with concerned expression. Miss Nelson, there's a problem with today's beer delivery. The driver says Mr. Harlow canceled our regular order, claiming the Silver Spur is closing down after the hearing on Monday. Katherine exchanged a glance with Quinn, whose expression darkened. I'll handle this, she assured Thomas, rising to her feet. Outside, she found a delivery wagon with the Cheyenne Brewery logo painted on its side. The driver, a burly man in his 40s, looked confused when Katherine introduced herself. Madam, I've got orders from Mr. Harlow not to deliver to the Silver Spur anymore, he explained. Said the place was changing hands and the new owners would make different arrangements. Mr. Harlow has no authority to cancel orders for my establishment, Katherine stated firmly. I am the legal owner of the Silver Spur, and I require the usual delivery as scheduled. The driver scratched his head uncertainly. "I don't know, madam. Mr. Harlow's been handling orders for years now." "I understand your confusion," Katherine replied, her tone softening. "However, I can show you the deed to the Silver Spur with my name on it, if that would help clarify matters." While the driver considered this, Quinn stepped forward. "Joe, you know me. I'm telling you officially that Miss Nelson is the rightful owner of this establishment. Any instructions from Vince Harlow regarding the Silver Spur should be disregarded." The sheriff's official endorsement seemed to sway the driver. "Well, if you say so, Sheriff, I guess I can unload the usual order." "Thank you," Katherine said with a genuine smile. "And please inform your employer that all future communications regarding the Silver Spur should come directly to me, not to Mr. Harlow." As the driver began unloading barrels, Katherine turned to Quinn with a determined expression. "We need to contact all our suppliers immediately. Harlow is trying to cut off our inventory." "I'll help you draft the messages," Quinn offered. "We can send them out on tomorrow's stage to Cheyenne." For the rest of the day, Katherine worked on securing her supply lines, writing clear explanations to each vendor about the change in management, and explicitly revoking any authority Harlow might claim to act on behalf of the Silver Spur. Quinn assisted with names and addresses, his knowledge of regional businesses proving invaluable. The evening brought another busy night at the saloon, with even more customers than usual, many clearly drawn by curiosity about the ownership dispute that had become the talk of Oroville. Katherine made a point of speaking personally with as many patrons as possible, establishing her presence and authority through direct engagement rather than confrontation. "You're winning them over," Quinn observed late in the evening as they watched the crowded room. "Harlow miscalculated with that public display today. People here value straightforwardness, and you showed plenty of that." "I hope so," Katherine replied, though doubt still lingered. "The hearing still concerns me." Judge Wilson's friendship with Harlow could influence his decision regardless of the evidence. "That's possible," Quinn acknowledged. "But remember, even judges in frontier towns have reputations to maintain. Too obvious a bias could undermine Wilson's standing in the legal community." Katherine smiled gratefully at his reassurance. "You always find the hopeful perspective, don't you?" "Someone needs to," he replied with a warm glance that made her heart skip. "Especially when you're carrying the weight of all this on your shoulders." "Not alone," Katherine corrected softly. "You've been beside me every step of the way." Something shifted in Quinn's eyes, a deepening of emotion that made Katherine suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how natural it felt to share these quiet moments amid the saloon's bustle. The moment was broken by Frank calling for Quinn's assistance with a rowdy customer near the bar. As the sheriff moved away to handle the situation, Katherine found herself watching him with a new awareness, noting the confident set of his shoulders, the calm authority in his manner, and the underlying kindness that informed all his interactions. In less than a week, Quinn O'Connor had become essential to her life in Oroville, not just as an ally against Harlow, but as someone whose opinion she valued and whose presence she increasingly craved. The realization was both thrilling and unsettling for a woman who had prided herself on independence. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation for Monday's hearing. Katherine met twice with James Calloway, reviewing strategies and practicing her responses to likely questions. Martha Abernathy provided a formal written statement about Daniel Nelson's intentions, which Calloway assured Katherine would carry significant weight with the court. Sunday evening found Katherine uncharacteristically restless. The Silver Spur was closed, as was customary in deference to the town's church-going population, leaving her alone with her thoughts in her uncle's quarters. After attempting to read for an hour without absorbing a single page, she decided fresh air might clear her mind. The back garden was peaceful in the fading light, the herbs and vegetables casting long shadows across the small enclosure. Katherine settled on a simple wooden bench, breathing deeply of the sage-scented air as she contemplated the hearing that would determine her future in Oroville. "Thought I might find you here," Quinn's voice came from the garden gate. "Mind some company?" Katherine smiled, genuinely pleased to see him. "Not at all. I was just gathering my thoughts for tomorrow." Quinn joined her on the bench, his presence comforting in the growing twilight. "Calloway feels confident about our case. I spoke with him this afternoon." "As do I, logically," Katherine admitted. "Yet I can't help worrying. There's so much at stake, not just for me, but for Sarah, Thomas, Frank, Josiah, everyone who depends on the Silver Spur." "That's what makes you different from Harlow," Quinn observed quietly. "He sees the saloon as a source of money and influence. You see it as a responsibility to people." "My uncle saw it that way too, I think," Katherine mused, "from everything I've learned about him this week." "He did," Quinn confirmed. "Daniel cared about this town and the people in it. It's why he stayed even after the big silver strike played out." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last golden light fade from the western sky. When Quinn spoke again, his voice had a new, more personal quality. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Katherine, I want you to know I'm proud to have stood with you through this." She turned to face him, touched by the sincerity in his expression. "I couldn't have faced it without you, Quinn." "You've been—" Words failed her momentarily. "You've been my strength here." "You've always had your own strength," he countered gently. "I just helped you find your footing in unfamiliar territory." The tenderness in his eyes made Katherine's pulse quicken. Without conscious thought, she found herself leaning closer to him, drawn by something powerful and undeniable between them. Quinn's hand came up to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her skin. "Katherine," he breathed, the single word carrying a weight of emotion. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened, as Katherine responded to the warmth and strength she found in his embrace. His arms encircled her, pulling her closer as the last light faded from the sky above them. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the day you arrived," he confessed softly. Katherine smiled, her heart fuller than she could remember it being in years, perhaps ever. "I think I've been waiting for you to do it since that first day too," she replied, "though I didn't realize it until recently." Quinn brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression a mixture of tenderness and concern. "The timing isn't ideal with the hearing tomorrow." "No," Katherine agreed, "but I'm glad we didn't wait any longer." He smiled at that, then grew serious again. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Katherine, whatever Judge Wilson decides, we'll face it together. I want you to know that." "I do know it," she assured him, the certainty of his support giving her renewed confidence for the challenge ahead. "And knowing that makes tomorrow less daunting." They remained in the garden until stars appeared in the clear Wyoming sky, talking quietly about their hopes for the future, both for the Silver Spur and for the connection growing between them. When Quinn finally took his leave with a gentle goodnight kiss, Katherine returned to her quarters feeling strangely peaceful despite the uncertainty of tomorrow's hearing. Whatever Vince Harlow and his allies might try, she no longer faced them alone. She had evidence, allies, and most importantly, she had Quinn, the man whose quiet strength and unwavering support had come to mean more to her than she ever could have anticipated when she first stepped down from that dusty stagecoach. The territorial courthouse occupied a modest building on Oroville's Main Street. its wooden facade distinguished only by a painted sign and a small bell tower. Despite its humble appearance, the building represented law and order in a territory where both were still being established, a fact that Katherine appreciated more fully now that her own future hung in the balance of its proceedings. She arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, dressed in her most businesslike attire, a tailored navy dress with minimal ornamentation that projected both competence and respect for the court. James Calloway met her at the entrance, looking confident in a well-worn but dignified suit. "Good morning, Miss Nelson," he greeted her, his manner reassuringly calm. "I've reviewed our strategy once more and feel entirely confident in our position. Your uncle's journal provides exactly the evidence we need." "Thank you, Mr. Calloway," Katherine replied. "Is there anything else I should know before we begin?" "Just remember to address the judge respectfully but directly," the lawyer advised. "Answer only what is asked, without elaboration. And most importantly, remain composed regardless of what Harlow or his attorney might say." As they entered the courtroom, Katherine was surprised to find it already crowded. Many of the Silver Spur's regular customers were present, along with Martha Abernathy, Sarah, and the other staff members. Mayor Hamilton sat near the front with several town council members, their expressions carefully neutral. Vince Harlow occupied a table at the front of the room, accompanied by a sharp-featured man whom Calloway identified as Leonard Davis, a lawyer from Cheyenne who handled most of Harlow's legal affairs. Harlow nodded curtly when he saw Katherine, his eyes cold with determination. Quinn entered a few minutes later, wearing his sheriff's badge but not his sidearm, as was customary in the courtroom. He caught Katherine's eye briefly, offering a small smile of encouragement before taking a seat near the back. At precisely 9:30, a side door opened, and Judge Wilson entered, his black robe lending gravity to proceedings that might otherwise have seemed informal. Everyone rose as the clerk announced the court in session. "Be seated," Wilson instructed, settling behind the bench and surveying the room with practiced authority. "We're here to address the matter of Harlow versus Nelson regarding ownership claims to the establishment known as the Silver Spur Saloon." The judge shuffled through some papers before continuing. "Mr. Davis, as representative for the complainant, please present your case." Leonard Davis rose smoothly, his expensive suit and confident manner suggesting a man accustomed to courtroom victories. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Mr. Vincent Harlow, entered into a verbal partnership agreement with the late Daniel Nelson approximately 5 years ago. Under this agreement, Mr. Harlow provided capital investment, business connections, and management expertise in exchange for a half-ownership interest in the Silver Spur Saloon. Davis proceeded to outline how Harlow had allegedly improved the saloon's profitability through his connections and business acumen, all with the understanding that he was working as a partner, not merely an employee. He called 3 witnesses, a supplier, a regular customer, and a town councilman, each of whom testified to hearing Daniel Nelson refer to Harlow as his partner in casual conversation. Katherine listened carefully, noting how the testimonies seemed rehearsed and suspiciously similar in their wording. She made notes for Calloway, who nodded occasionally to indicate he'd observed the same patterns. When Davis concluded his presentation, Judge Wilson turned to Calloway. "Counselor, you may present the respondent's case." James Calloway rose with deliberate calm. "Thank you, Your Honor. The facts in this case are straightforward. Daniel Nelson was the sole owner of the Silver Spur Saloon from its founding until his death earlier this year. In his will, probated and approved by this court, he left the establishment in its entirety to his niece, Miss Katherine Nelson. At no point did Daniel Nelson enter into a legally binding partnership agreement with Mr. Harlow. Calloway approached the bench with a document. I submit as evidence the deed to the Silver Spur, which has remained solely in Daniel Nelson's name throughout the period in question. If Mr. Harlow were truly a partner, one would expect the legal documents to reflect this arrangement. Judge Wilson examined the deed, his expression thoughtful. Furthermore, Calloway continued, I submit this journal kept by Daniel Nelson over the past 3 years, in which he explicitly documents his repeated refusal to enter into partnership with Mr. Harlow despite numerous proposals. This caused a stir in the courtroom. Judge Wilson accepted the journal with evident curiosity, taking time to page through several entries while Davis conferred urgently with Harlow. Your Honor, Davis objected, rising to his feet. This document has not been authenticated. It could easily have been created after the fact to support Miss Nelson's claims. The journal is written entirely in Daniel Nelson's hand, Calloway countered. His handwriting can be verified by comparing it to other documents he signed, including the deed already submitted to the court. Judge Wilson nodded slowly. I'm familiar with Daniel Nelson's handwriting from previous legal matters. This appears consistent with his hand. He continued reading selected passages, his brow furrowed in concentration. Calloway called Martha Abernathy to testify next. The older woman spoke clearly and confidently about her friendship with Daniel Nelson, and his explicit statements that the Silver Spur would pass to his niece without encumbrances. Daniel told me specifically, not 2 months before his passing, that he had declined Vince Harlow's partnership proposals multiple times, Martha testified. He said, Martha, that man wants what I built without earning it honestly, and I won't have it. When Katherine comes, she'll get the Silver Spur free and clear, just as I built it. Davis attempted to undermine Martha's testimony by suggesting her friendship with Daniel colored her recollection. But the older woman remained steadfast, her dignified certainty making a visible impression on both the judge and the spectators. Finally, Katherine herself took the stand, describing her arrival in Oroville and the discovery of her uncle's private records documenting Harlow's financial mismanagement. The evidence indicates not that Mr. Harlow was a partner in the business, she concluded, but rather that he was systematically misappropriating funds while claiming authority he did not possess. This blunt statement caused another stir in the courtroom. Harlow's face darkened with barely suppressed rage, while several spectators nodded in agreement with Katherine's assessment. After both sides had presented their cases, Judge Wilson called a brief recess to review the evidence. As the courtroom emptied temporarily, Calloway expressed cautious optimism to Katherine. The journal is compelling evidence, he observed, and Martha Abernathy made an excellent witness. Judge Wilson may be friends with Harlow, but he's not a fool. The evidence clearly supports your position. Quinn approached them, his expression carefully neutral due to his official position, but his eyes conveyed support. You did well up there, he told Katherine quietly. Clear and direct without showing anger despite the provocation. Thank you, Katherine replied, drawing strength from his presence. I just hope Judge Wilson sees through Harlow's claims. When court resumed 30 minutes later, the room fell silent as Judge Wilson took his seat. He arranged his papers deliberately before addressing the assembly. Having reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, I am prepared to render a decision in the matter of Harlow versus Nelson, he announced, his tone formal. Katherine held her breath, aware of Harlow doing the same across the aisle. The complainant, Mr. Harlow, has presented testimony suggesting that Daniel Nelson referred to him as a partner in casual conversation. However, such references, even if accurately recalled, do not constitute a legally binding partnership agreement. Harlow shifted in his seat, his expression darkening as he sensed the direction of the ruling. Conversely, the respondent has provided substantial documentary evidence that Daniel Nelson maintained sole ownership of the Silver Spur and explicitly declined to enter into partnership with Mr. Harlow. The journal entries, written in Daniel Nelson's hand over an extended period, carry significant weight as contemporaneous documentation of his business decisions and intentions. Judge Wilson cleared his throat before continuing. Furthermore, the will of Daniel Nelson, previously probated by this court, clearly bequeaths the Silver Spur in its entirety to his niece, Katherine Nelson, with no mention of outstanding partnership claims or obligations. The judge's gaze swept the courtroom before settling on Harlow. While I acknowledge Mr. Harlow's contributions to the business as an employee or associate, I find insufficient evidence to support his claim of partnership. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that Katherine Nelson is the sole and rightful owner of the establishment known as the Silver Spur Saloon, with all rights and privileges pertaining thereto. Relief washed through Katherine in a powerful wave. Beside her, Calloway nodded in satisfaction, while across the aisle, Harlow's face contorted with fury. "This ruling is effective immediately," Judge Wilson concluded. "Court is adjourned." As the spectators rose, many approached Katherine with congratulations and expressions of support. Martha Abernathy embraced her warmly, while Sarah and the other staff members beamed with evident relief. Even Mayor Hamilton came forward to offer a somewhat stilted acknowledgement of the verdict. Vince Harlow pushed through the crowd toward Katherine, his eyes blazing with anger. "This isn't over, Miss Nelson," he hissed, low enough that only she could hear. "You may have won today, but Oroville is my town. You'll regret making an enemy of me." Before Katherine could respond, Quinn appeared at her side, his expression neutral but his presence unmistakably protective. "The judge has ruled, Vince. I suggest you accept it gracefully." Harlow's gaze flickered between them, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "I see how it is," he said coldly. "Our sheriff has found himself a new interest." "That's enough, Vince," Quinn warned quietly. "Take your loss like a man and walk away." For a moment, it seemed Harlow might escalate the confrontation, but a glance around the courtroom where many were watching the exchange with interest apparently convinced him otherwise. With a final glare at Katherine, he turned and strode from the courthouse, Davis hurrying to keep pace with him. "Don't let him worry you," Quinn advised as they watched Harlow depart. "He's angry now, but he's also practical. Once he realizes the town is accepting you as the legitimate owner, he'll move on to other schemes." "I hope you're right," Katherine replied, though she couldn't entirely dismiss Harlow's threat. "For now, I'm simply relieved the Silver Spur is secure." As they left the courthouse together, Katherine was struck by how quickly Oroville had come to feel like home, not just the saloon that was now legally hers, but the town itself, with its dusty streets and weathered buildings. In just over a week, she had established herself as a business owner, made allies among the townspeople, and found in Quinn O'Connor someone who understood and supported her in ways she'd never experienced before. "What happens now?" Quinn asked as they walked toward the Silver Spur, where Sarah was preparing a celebratory luncheon for the staff. Katherine considered the question thoughtfully. "Now I commit to making the Silver Spur the best establishment it can be, not just profitable, but a true gathering place for Oroville, as my uncle intended." "No thoughts of returning east?" Quinn inquired, his tone carefully neutral though his eyes revealed deeper interest in her answer. Katherine shook her head decisively. Boston seems very far away now in more ways than distance. My life is here now, the business, the people I've come to care about." She met his gaze directly. "The connections I've made." The smile that spread across Quinn's face at her words warmed Katherine to her core. "I'm very glad to hear that," he said softly, his hand finding hers as they walked. Behind them, the courthouse bell rang out the noon hour, its clear tones signaling not just midday, but the beginning of Katherine Nelson's new life in Oroville, a life built on her uncle's legacy, her own determination, and the unexpected gift of finding someone who saw her strength and admired her for it. In the months that followed, Katherine transformed the Silver Spur into an establishment that even her uncle might not have envisioned. Building on Daniel's foundation, she expanded the food offerings, added weekly musical performances that drew families as well as the traditional clientele, and instituted a small reading room that operated during daylight hours, fulfilling her uncle's dream of promoting education alongside commerce. Vince Harlow remained in Oroville, but his influence waned as Katherine's grew. Without access to the Silver Spur's profits, his ability to curry favor through generous loans and free drinks diminished. When he attempted to spread rumors about Katherine's management, he found fewer willing listeners as the saloon's success spoke louder than his criticisms. Quinn remained a steadfast presence in Katherine's life, their relationship deepening as summer turned to autumn and then to the crisp days of early winter. They moved cautiously at first, mindful of the town's scrutiny, but by Christmas, few in Oroville were surprised when the sheriff and the saloon owner announced their engagement. They married the following spring in a ceremony that brought together the entire community, miners and ranchers, merchants and laborers, all gathered to celebrate the union of two people who had come to represent the best of what Oroville could be. Martha Abernathy wept openly, declaring that Daniel Nelson would have been prouder of this day than any other. As Katherine and Quinn exchanged vows in the small church on Main Street, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment, from a reluctant inheritance to a purposeful life, from strangers to neighbors, from uncertainty to love. Later, at their wedding reception held naturally at the Silver Spur, Quinn pulled her into a quiet corner away from the celebrating crowd. "Happy?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that had first captured her heart. "More than I knew was possible," Katherine replied honestly, leaning into his embrace. "When I stepped off that stagecoach last summer, I never imagined finding all this." "I knew," Quinn confessed with a smile. "The moment I saw you standing there, refusing to be intimidated by all those staring eyes. I told you then, let them stare. You're the finest thing this town has seen," Katherine finished for him, remembering his words with perfect clarity. "I thought you were just being kind to a newcomer." Quinn shook his head, his expression tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I was being entirely selfish, trying to make a good impression on the most remarkable woman I'd ever met." "It worked," Katherine assured him with a smile, rising on tiptoe to kiss him as their friends and neighbors called for the bride and groom to rejoin the celebration. Outside the windows of the Silver Spur, Oroville stretched in all directions, no longer a strange frontier town, but home in the deepest sense of the word. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, Katherine would face them as she had faced Vince Harlow and all the doubters who had stared when she first arrived, with determination, dignity, and the steadfast support of the man who had seen her strength from the beginning. Together, they stepped back into the light of the saloon, into the future they would build in this town that had given them both far more than silver it had given them each other, and a place where they truly belonged. In the years that followed, Katherine and Quinn built a life together that balanced their respective responsibilities to the town and their growing family. The Silver Spur continued to thrive under Katherine's management, evolving with Oroville's changing fortunes. When the last silver mine closed in 1881, the saloon had already diversified enough that the economic impact was minimal. Katherine had anticipated the shift and positioned the business to serve the growing ranching community. Their first child, a son they named Daniel after Katherine's uncle, was born in the winter of 1878, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Quinn converted the rooms above the saloon into a comfortable family home, though they eventually built a proper house on a small plot of land at the edge of town, where the children could have space to play away from the business. Vince Harlow remained in Oroville for another year after losing his court case, making occasional attempts to undermine Katherine's position, but his influence continued to wane. When a banking opportunity arose in the new railroad town of Rawlins, he departed without ceremony, leaving behind few who mourned his absence. Mayor Hamilton, proving more adaptable than Katherine had initially given him credit for, gradually became an ally rather than an obstacle. As Oroville transitioned from mining to ranching and commerce, he recognized the value of the Silver Spur as a community gathering place and supported Katherine's efforts to make it a respectable establishment that served the town's evolving needs. By 1885, the O'Connors were among Oroville's most respected citizens. Quinn continued as sheriff, maintaining order with a blend of authority and fairness that earned him re-election year after year. Katherine's business acumen became legendary in the region, and she occasionally advised other women looking to establish themselves in frontier enterprises. Martha Abernathy remained a dear friend until her passing in 1887, leaving Katherine a collection of handwritten recipes and a letter revealing that she and Daniel Nelson had once been more than friends, a quiet romance in their later years that they had kept private out of respect for Martha's late husband's memory. On warm summer evenings, Katherine and Quinn often sat in the garden behind the Silver Spur, the same garden where they had shared their first kiss. As their children played nearby, they would reflect on the journey that had brought them together and the future they continued to build in Oroville. "Do you ever regret not returning to Boston?" Quinn asked once, during their 10th anniversary celebration. Katherine looked around at the life they had created, their healthy children, their successful businesses, the community that had accepted her as one of its own, and shook her head with absolute certainty. "Never," she replied, reaching for his hand across the garden bench. "Everything I need is right here." And when Quinn smiled and said, "You're still the finest thing this town has ever seen," Katherine knew that some truths remained constant, even as the world around them changed with each passing year. The stares that had once made her uncomfortable on that first day in Oroville had transformed into looks of respect, and the inheritance she had initially viewed as a burden had become the foundation for a life richer than anything she could have imagined back in her father's Boston home. It was a life built on courage, determination, and the love of a man who had seen her strength from the very beginning, a true partnership that, unlike Vince Harlow's false claims, was founded on mutual respect and shared dreams for the future they would continue to build together in the heart of Wyoming Territory.